Welcome to
Welcome
Monarchist Minute. I'm your host, William Stout, with Frederick V and Watercube.
Hello.
Tonight, we're going to have a shorter episode. Everyone here is
Sadly,
tired, and
because the week
is
wasn't very interesting.
yeah, and it wasn't a very newsworthy week. But we do have a couple of topics.
but
There's one particularly.
besides King Charles being diagnosed with cancer, but
Yeah. So
yeah,
unfortunately, there's not much to talk about with that because of how hush-hush Britain seems. Not that it, in my opinion, not that it's frankly any of our business, because I'm one of the people who very much believes in the premise that the royal family's business is the royal family's business, and just because they're royals doesn't mean that their personal business must be aired for the entire world to see. I know, how dare I?
yeah. But that doesn't mean nothing happened this week. We have reports from Armenia and Venezuela,
Yes, yes.
or Gaia, I think, or at least somewhere
Guyana.
in
I believe
South
it's pronounced
America.
Guyana.
Yeah.
Watercube, do you have a pronunciation?
Not off the top of my head.
All right, let's just go with Guyana, or it might be
Yeah.
Guinea.
So what's going?
You're talking about Guyana. Okay, I'm sorry.
Guyana. So what's been transpiring is that, I think if you remember, Venezuela wanted a piece of Guyana's land because it had oil on it, right?
Well,
Right,
they've always
but-
had a claim on the region, even at the beginning of the Venezuelan state. It's been something that's been in constant contention. I think Theodore Roosevelt
But now they really want it.
Well, no, they've always really wanted it.
And now this week they have built up their army on the border of Gaia, I think.
It seems
Can't really
that
pronounce the
Putin-
country's name. Why does
They've
that have to
always
come
had
up with
troops
weird
stationed nearby, and they've always done border excursions into the territory. And this was even before the nominally socialist regime in Venezuela, because it's always been their ambition to maintain control over that region. Like, it's something that they're just not willing to give up because of the large indigenous population there. It goes back to the Cadillo system or something. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's been a very long-lasting imperial ambition for the Venezuelan state, and they view it as integral to their geopolitical survival to undermine Guyana.
But this could
Guyana remained colonial states much later than the rest of the rest of South America, because it was divided up between the Dutch and the British.
And Guyana has had like a tumultuous history. Like Guyana, I think specifically the Guyana Venezuela is interested in, was also the host of the People's Temples compound, and has often been like very loosely governed, so it makes it an easier target for an external force to try to impose its will on it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But it seems that Putin's boldness in Ukraine has inspired dilettantes across the world to make power grabs in order to, I guess, ensure the I don't want to say ensure the security, but more like ensure the legitimacy of their regimes. Because as soon as Putin went after Ukraine, we saw China posturing more for Taiwan. We saw now in Venezuela them posturing for Guyana.
This could lead to a war for that territory.
It won't lead to a war. Venezuela won't actually risk it. Venezuela is doing this mostly to just try to bolster public support for the regime, because the regime's in a weak space, because it's Maduro in charge currently, right? After Hugo Chavez. Yeah, Maduro's weaker and way more corrupt than Chavez, and he doesn't have the idealism that Chavez had attached to his regime. So he's trying to build up that charisma by seeming like a wartime leader and also a hero by reclaiming this lost province of Venezuela.
Why doesn't he actually just take care of his people? That would probably do a much better job.
Because he likes lining his own pockets. It's kind of like the Saud family. Like, most of the corrupt oligarchs and leaders in the world don't really care about their nation or their people. They just want to line their pockets.
Right. I know the answer was rhetorical. I just still had to point it out. It's like, all this can be solved just by being a decent leader.
And also, like,
Please.
you'd have to solve so many systemic issues. Like, I think they're still dealing with
That's
like right-wing death squads over in that area. Same with
Oh,
while Venezuela tries to
oh.
fund FARC.
Let's not
Yeah.
talk about the whole entire basket case that is Latin America and basically what happens when you jump straight from feudalism into trying to form liberal democracies.
Yeah. Also, besides that, there's news that came out about the Russian collusion case.
What new findings are going on with that, if I may ask?
So essentially, there's supposed to be this binder that had incriminating evidence that the Obamas used foreign spy agencies to spy on the Trump campaign, or at least spy on Trump.
Well,
That's the whole reason why we use foreign agencies. The main reason why we have the CIA in the UK is so we can ignore U.S. law. Like that's always been done, especially to spy on American citizens. That's nothing out of the norm.
don't you mean MI6 or
No, we station people foreignly to work with MI6 and such because CIA would basically use the MI6 as proxies to spy on American citizens because there's not as much civil protections for for citizens of the Commonwealth and by proxy, like restrictions to Americans who travel to the UK. I'd have to ask. I remember reading about this, and a friend had an article about it. It's fascinating stuff. But it is a normal thing.
But you gotta love the fact that the U.S. government is hopping jurisdictions in order to basically violate our constitutional rights. Anywho, so out of Venezuela, do we have anything more to touch on Venezuela?
I'd say that like there's nothing really to worry about. Like I just want to get that clear because if Venezuela acts, I will just like eat a can of worms. And I will record it and post that publicly.
And okay, you know what? I'm gonna hold you to that, and if you do, we're going to definitely post that on all of our platforms.
I'm down.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome. But yeah, like if Venezuela actually tries, I think Colombia is going to jump them, Brazil is going to jump them. It might be the thing that finally brings a major conflict back to South America.
It'd be like Paraguay all over again.
Or the
Only it
Falklands.
wouldn't be nearly as tragically hilarious. It would just
it'll be like the Falklands again, since Gaia is a British, you know.
Well, Guyana's like half British, half Dutch.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'm not sure if Guyana is still in the Commonwealth either. Like I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
Is it still in the Commonwealth? It's still in the Imperial Commonwealth? Yeah. Okay. But yeah, this could lead to another conflict in South America.
They are still a Commonwealth country.
Oh, hang on a second. Never mind.
So they're guaranteed by Britain. So I don't think Venezuela would go after them without risking the British getting involved.
Yeah, it's all posturing.
Hang on a second. I was wrong. Guyana isn't half Dutch. That's Cayenne.
Yeah, there's like they all became their own independent states, except the French one, which is where the French store their space program.
Really? That's where they store their space program?
Really?
Yeah. That's where they do their rocket launches from because they have nowhere else to do it. They train the French Foreign Legion there.
Wait, dang. So why don't the
so in like jungle combat or something?
Yeah.
Maybe, probably. Wait, so why doesn't the French keep their space program in mainland France?
I don't think there's like optimal positions to fire rockets from. It's kind of like why ours is like in Florida. It's as close to the equator as you can get.
Right, and you want to keep it close to the equator because, well,
I think it's easier to reach escape velocity. I'm not really sure. I am not a physicist.
Right. Maybe it just has to do with like flat land, having the flat land capable of properly launching a rocket.
That possibly could be it as well.
Right.
Right, because
I'm sure the French don't do much space launches over there really anymore.
No, they did one like a couple of years ago. Like it's every couple of years they launch one up there, oftentimes for their own satellites and also for their own broadcasting systems and all that.
I still think one of the funniest
there's
things
so much space junk that it would possibly be impossible to really go up there. Really,
the first person who figures out how to harvest and recycle all the trash in outer space is going to be a billionaire.
Yeah. But we're getting off topic with the French.
Right,
the French people.
Well, of course, that's usually how this goes when you have the conversation. Who knows what the conversation leads? You know, while we're still on the topic of...
it seems they did a launch on July 5th, 2023, actually. They launched 2 military communication satellites. One for Germany as well. Like, one France, one German.
You know, one of the things that still amazes me is despite the fact that the Soviet Union fell apart, Russia and Kazakhstan still have this understanding where they just let Russia use the Cosmodrome.
Well, Kazakhstan kind of knows its place in relation to the Russian state where they're reliant on Russian aid for their existence. Yeah, like, they're basically just a vassal state to the Kremlin at this point.
Right, because if I'm being honest about the Central Asian republics, there's no reason for those nations to be as developed as they are because there really isn't much of historical precedent for them being as developed as they are.
Well, I think like under Soviet guidance, they tended to develop pretty well, and they were given a fair bit of autonomy to develop. The issues really came after the fall of the Soviet Union and the oligarchs that rose up out of the apparatchiks that were inside the communist parties in those areas.
The other issue with Central Asia was Soviet central planning these economies.
And also Turkmenistan is not the very nicest place.
Well, most of these states are going to be petty despotisms, but it's like, what do you expect out of a society that underwent a collapse? Like, they're trying to rebuild something after they had a whole system, which it might have not worked the best, but it worked.
If you take a look at the capital of Turkmenistan, there isn't really many people there.
Well, like
when you do take a look at the populated areas, these are like poor areas of the country. And they don't want to show that to the rest of the world.
Well, who would?
That's why they cut off the internet.
Well, it's called Central Asia is North Korea for a reason, but I think one of the biggest problems we see out here in Central Asia is since the Soviets had their planned economy, they pigeonholed these nations into very specific industries that once the Soviet Union fell apart, the apparatus supporting these industries and their markets basically left them for dead. Like how they tried to basically turn the Aral Sea and the area around into the world's largest cotton growing area. And so all these places have industries built for cotton, but no longer have the infrastructure, the markets, and the means to do anything with it.
Yeah, like the Soviets were honestly practicing a pseudo-mercantilism with that as well, because the main reason why they tried to keep the Warsaw Pact in line was also to have people to export to.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Comes back to the whole, was it really communism or just state capitalism, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I'd honestly say, like, to just touch on that nasty argument there, is that the Soviet Union wasn't real communism, according to, like, Marx and Lenin and all of them. They were developing via state, like, command economies. They're going through their mercantilist period, trying to catch up with the rest of the world because of how deindustrialized they were to begin with.
That is actually a fair argument, and I will accept that.
Yeah.
Anywho.
But anyway, Armenia.
Also a former Soviet state. You know, that's another funny part. Armenia and Azerbaijan, in this case, ironically enough, are both also former Soviet states.
And you see the pains of Soviet border drawing in that area with, what's the region called? It began with an N, and I do not know how to pronounce it for the life of me, but it was the area that tried to declare independence, and that recently fell.
Well, I forget the name of the region, but the main issue, and this is the issue with the Caucasus in general, is that the ethnic lines in the Caucasus are so incredibly messy because of how much people migrate through that region, because it's one of the main corridors into the steppes of Eastern Europe, into the Middle East, out of Central Asia. And so, honestly, I can't blame the Soviets too much, because how the hell do you fix this? How the hell do you solve this?
Well, like, the thing is, though, the Soviets, like, they looked at it, they knew the solution, they started to work on the solution under Lenin with the ASSR system, because there were so many different minorities and linguistic minorities that were pretty geographically cogent, but they were really small pockets. But that really got undone under the Stalin system when divide and rule became the norm.
Yeah.
I also
and the reason those borders were drawn was because to keep the areas under control.
Right.
Well, yeah, like a lot of the borders there, like the borders now between Armenia and Azerbaijan, they're not as bad as they could have been. Most of the like grossness of the borders really comes in with Georgia and the parts of the Caucasus that are still controlled by Russia. The situation happening in Azerbaijan and Armenia, I think, came out of some like issue where the Armenians in Azerbaijan used to be in an ASSR, and then they slowly had their autonomy chipped away. And when they became independent, they lost all autonomy, which caused violence and rebellion and ethnic tension.
Yes, and of course, there's also the constant and continuous issue with both the Turkic Azerbaijanis and Turks really, really wanting the Armenians to just disappear.
The Soviets were chipping away at their autonomy to control them, basically. Make sure that no bullshit happens.
It was the Azerbaijani SSR that was first chipping away at the Armenian thing. Like, you have to remember that this stuff would go bottom up as well compared to just top down. It wasn't just the Supreme Soviet in Moscow chipping away at it, but also with the Turks. Yeah, like Turkey has had a great interest in undermining Armenia, because if Armenia exists, that means there's the possibility for Greater Armenia and the ethnic minorities that exist in Eastern Turkey to try to basically remove their shackles and become independent nation states. Like, they do the same with the Kurds, they do the same with the Armenians, they do the same with what's the other one that I cannot remember?
Well, they did it and succeeded in doing it with the Anatolian Greeks.
Yes, they had a whole like mutual genocide between the Greeks and the Turks, where they did a population exchange.
Right, although I firmly believe that the Turks did far more genociding than the Greeks could ever dream of.
Oh yeah, I'm more just referencing also the expulsions of Turks from Greece proper as well when they did that population exchange, which technically I think falls under the definition of genocide.
I mean, it does, but at the same
compared what the Young Turks were up to, yeah, that's clear cut. Like the Armenian genocide, which is still haunts and looms over Armenia because of how powerful Turkey is, and since Turkey is a NATO partner, it's really hard for us to maneuver as the U.S. state in that region.
Yeah.
Honestly, I am not opposed to the idea of throwing Turkey out of NATO, especially because Turkey doesn't seem to fall in line with NATO's interests. Like, we've caught them red-handed in the past supporting Islamists. We've caught them basically cozying up to Russia. We've caught them colluding with American enemies. Like, why do we still keep the Turks around?
This Bosporus Straits, it bottles Russia up a bit more directly than if they weren't in NATO. Like, if Turkey wasn't in NATO, the last leash America has on the Turks goes away. They might try to stab us in the back every 5 minutes, but the French did the exact same thing with NATO during the Cold War. Like, we expect them to try to hurt us and go behind our back and stuff like that. NATO is meant to be the leash to try to wrangle them.
Well, at least the French weren't completely immoral. Like, the French did out this weird nationalism, which, honestly, given France, I can respect. But Turkey, whenever Turkey does it, they always seem to be doing something exceptionally shady. Like I said, like funding Islamists to prolong the Syrian civil war, or committing a genocide and trying to erase Armenian culture.
I'm not sure if, I think the French were equally as immoral because of their actions in West Africa, which really hurt American interest in the region, where they undermined a lot of the beginning nation states in that region so much to the point where America couldn't even get the foot in the door because how tainted we were by the French, along with the situation that happened in South Vietnam, which the only reason why we're over there was for the French, and French and British interests are the reason why we didn't really fully support the Shah.
Right. That's actually fair. Thank you for that. I'm not overly informed on West Africa or the relation with the Shah, and I completely forgot about Vietnam, which frankly I'm ashamed of, come to think of it.
Yeah, the French and the British have not been the most faithful allies, at least in serving American interests, and they've oftentimes hurt us as much as Turkey has.
Well,
so it's expected.
I'll give the British more credit where credit is due because they went with us through the entirety of all of our escapades in the Middle East during the late 20th and 21st century.
Oh, with the British, they've been way more loyal. There's with the Anglo-American alliance, that's a lot more stronger. But the French, Germans, and Turks, they all will try to worm.
You would think the U.S. and France would have a stronger historical alliance, given how they were our OG allies from the Revolution, but I guess not.
Maybe during the Revolutionary War, but no, not today.
There's all reason why we started calling them freedom fries for a little bit.
Maybe if the Kingdom of France was still around, maybe the French royal family would remember how we were allies, but who knows?
Yeah.
I think, regardless of who's in charge in France, most nation states, if they have a rational leadership, they're always going to look out for their interests first. Which is the sign of a good leader of a country is they look out for their own interests. They just don't have to align with American interests.
Yeah, our interest is either in the Middle East or South Africa.
Middle East. The only reason why we have an interest there is to maintain.
I accidentally said
gentlemen, one at a time.
I accidentally said South Africa. I was supposed to say South America, but geez.
And not to mention East Asia, but
yeah. We get into the most wars. They say we're fighting for freedom. No, we're just fighting for capitalists and rich men.
Yeah, well,
one thing to get in with the Middle East, specifically with Iraq, Syria, and that sort of region. The main reason we actually are in, have our foot in the door there is that to maintain Europe's oil supply. It's not really for us, and because we're able to have oil autarky.
Reason there's a saying that we didn't go to Iraq because of weapons. We went there because of their oil. Because they were going to sell their oil in euros, not dollars.
The thing is also, Saddam did actually have the WMDs. The funny part is, we sold him the WMDs to use against the Iranians.
That's right, during the Iran-Iraq war.
Yeah.
And also talk about Iran. Hopefully the Shah returns.
That's a story for another time.
Wishful thinking.
Yeah, maybe
I think.
I mean, the Shah seems to be the leading figure of the opposition, though, so there is a good chance.
There's a chance, but we gotta just pray, basically.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, Reza Shah seems like a much better person than his father. I trust him, and I feel like he would actually bring better Iran than his father, but I think half the issues with his father is that his father
did try to do a good job, but
the problem
in the end, he couldn't really.
The problem with his father is that he tried to focus on keeping his. He did reform the country in ways that were positive, but he tried too hard to focus on keeping his power rather than helping his country, and he hurt his people.
But he did send Iranian students over here, which is a good thing.
Right.
He was trying to bring Iran to the 21st century, or the 20th century.
This is my whole thing with westernization. I think modernization is a good thing, but not every country needs to be Western in order to be modern. You can still keep your traditional economic arrangements and practices and modernize.
Yeah,
You don't need to adopt a Western
and I
capitalist
think
ideal
that's
structure.
and I think that's also a reason why the Shah fell was
Right.
because he wasn't keeping to the culture, which was the Muslim culture.
Right.
I
And
read
this is something,
a interesting thesis by the guy who overthrew the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt recently, talking about Westernization in Middle Eastern countries, and he does bring up the biggest issue is a lack of trust in Westernization because the people there do not know the intents, especially when the leadership has friends that are Western and they don't really know or really trust them because of what happened in Iran, Iraq, and so on. And the respect for outside of just the cultural parts of it and the religious parts of it, there just needs to be a building of strong institutions. He talked about the whole idea of needing an authoritarian leader to usher in democracy and allow that national development and the creation of a national identity.
I think
which
democracy should
hopefully,
be like should come naturally. It shouldn't be forced in.
Well,
you can't force democracy. That's hypocritical. Yeah, I mean, it's the least democratic, and I've said this about Afghanistan, I said this about Iraq. The least democratic thing you could do is point a gun at someone's head and tell them to vote.
our efforts in Iraq were a joke. We didn't even try to enforce democracy. All we did was make people who are members of the Ba'ath Party no longer able to participate in government, which in a party state, that meant everyone who was a teacher, everyone who was a police officer, and stuff like that. And then we started issuing credit cards before they had credit card readers, thinking that would fix the economy. And then we brought over some police chief from New York to help them get their shit together. Like, what was the plan there? We had no follow through on actually how to democratize Iraq.
Yeah, I'm watching Generation Kill on HBO right now, and basically because I was really young when the Iraq War happened, but my uncle went over, and I kind of want to learn more about what the Iraq War was like. And the more I watch Generation Kill, the more I think about it's like we really went into this basically on the skin of our
Cold
teeth
turkey, yeah.
without any plan whatsoever, and just expected to basically pull the result out of our ass.
We
'Cause
tried to
they're
pull
probably
denazification again, and here's the thing: the only reason why denazification somewhat worked, and I say somewhat, I don't really think it fully set in, is because we took former Nazi apparatchiks and used them in government in order to maintain order.
Yeah. Also, they let the people do the whole thing themselves.
And it's
because under their supervision, under our supervision, actually.
And, I feel like this is a very, very big problem in the US, where when it comes to foreign policy, we are really stupid. And I feel like that is because the US is still very, very a culturally isolationist country, where we're like not
also leaving a country to itself, even though that there's an enemy that could take it over at any time, is the best strategy. Yeah, take a look at Vietnam. We left it and then it fell.
Well, Vietnam was never going to last.
We should have never been in Vietnam in the first place.
Ho Chi Minh could have been our ally.
Incredibly popular.
Yeah, he was a pro-American. Even though he was a commie, he was pro-American.
He wasn't pro-American, but
no, he was.
He was.
He was. Him and Castro were hugely pro-American until America started interfering in their country when they did their domestic revolutions to try to further historical development.
Once they realized that the American dream and like all the American idealism is basically just something the U.S. government uses for the sake of propaganda, they were like. So once they realized we were all a bunch of massive hypocrites, they were
out.
And plus, he used the Declaration of Independence as his for his country.
I remember that. I do remember that, which is why I was going to say he was American sympathetic, but he wasn't necessarily pro-American. But yes, Ho Chi Minh was incredibly popular, and the southern government was incredibly corrupt.
There were warlords, there were oligarchs.
We had the Catholic dictatorship that tried to genocide the Buddhists down there, and then led to the creation of the Palmarian Catholic Church.
I don't even know who they are.
The sedevacantist cult. That's all you really need to know about them. But plus
the leader spoke French.
Like South Vietnam was such a mess. Like we should be glad we don't have even more blood on our hands by supporting that regime. Like,
and of course, we tried our hard to beat the crap out of North Vietnam.
We were the ones that actually
intentionally
assassinated that guy that was persecuting the Buddhists.
Well, we intentionally also propped up Pol Pot and hoping that he would balance out the Vietnamese, and look what all that did.
yeah, Comrade Pol Pot, critical support. Thank you, Henry Kissinger. Very cool.
But anyway, like I said, the problem with American foreign policy, especially in the mid to late 20th and early 21st centuries, is that America spent so much time as an isolationist power. When it finally came time to become global hegemon, we really didn't understand how to actually use our power other than for either ideological means or really, really short-sighted political gain.
The other thing I'd like to mention on top
America,
of
hang on a second. I gotta finish the thought here. Like, America has managed to fail both at being an idealist foreign policy state and a realist foreign policy state.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there. We also have the tendency to moralize our geopolitical positions to the point that we only think of ourselves as an eternal good. Like, say what you will about Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger at least practiced realpolitik. He was the American attempt at realpolitik, and we had to import someone from abroad to do that.
This guy literally helped the Khmer Rouge
into
power.
In order to grow closer with China, in order to cause a detente and undermine Vietnam, and also undermine the Soviet Union, which honestly was a masterclass of diplomacy to undermine the Soviets in such a way.
What I would have rather done, rather than grow closer to China, because of course, in hindsight, the Sino-Soviets, but was going to happen anyway. But what I would have done is I would have grown closer to Vietnam. I would have actually created a ring of communist states or like left-leaning states that were opposed to China and the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Well, like that's what we were trying to do with China against the Soviet Union. And the Sino-Soviet split already happened. Kissinger and Nixon and such only capitalized on that Sino-Soviet split. Like, the whole idea there was to move in strike while the iron's hot. Get in there, move them against the Soviets, have someone who's contesting the Soviets on, like, straight up on their border and also outmans them and is already industrialized and becoming a modern capitalist state. That was a good, like, choice in trying to at least get someone to antagonize the Soviets with. It eventually fell apart because Americans don't really know how to maintain those relationships, and as we start moralizing and thinking like, oh, we can't work with China, they're this evil, while we at the same time fund right-wing death squads in Central and South America. Like,
yep. Also, we fund cartels.
I feel like there's a big sorry for cutting you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, we also funded cartels like what was that one in Nicaragua?
Oh, the Contras.
Yeah, the Contras.
They weren't a cartel. They were a right-wing death squad that became a cartel. Same with Bolivia, where we imported the Butcher of Leon, SS war criminal Klaus Barbie, to help the cartels get their shit together in order to fight communists.
And here
criminals fighting communism. Best idea.
War criminals, people who who actively partook in the Holocaust to fight communism.
Oh shit.
Yeah, well, like,
that makes it spicy enough.
Here's the thing about American moral self-righteousness. This is only something that is believed by American citizens that the U.S. government puts on just for propaganda purposes. Because if you go into Congress and you look at all these people, you can't tell me a single one of them, not even Joe Biden himself in his mentally confused and brain-rotting state, can tell us with a straight face that they actually believe all this democratic crusading nonsense.
They had to drink a little bit of their Kool-Aid in order to justify it to themselves.
Running the show. Yeah, we're getting old of old people running the show. We need younger people to become the president. Who can actually, who's full of energy and shit. Like, these old people don't even have that.
I'm sorry, we're going to the Soviet system of grandfather to grandfather. There's no way to stop it.
Yeah.
This
also,
is
the saying goings about
this
the
is really
Soviets.
ending up like it's ending up in like the old Roman Republic in more ways than one, when we had like both Cato the Elder and Cato the Younger, and the problem with both is that they were both ancient serving at the same time because Cato the Elder just refused to die.
Also, the saying going is that the Soviets were actually the conservatives, while we were the more left-leaning.
That's not something worth getting into.
I feel like
their economics was left-wing, but they were socially conservative.
Again, it really depends on what era of the Soviets you look at. Also, artistically, they were fairly radical. Culturally, in most cases, fairly radical. It really, like Lenin, there's so much you go through.
This is going into the problem with looking at politics like a 2D concept. Like, when it comes to, like, call it the political compass, call it the political spectrum, whatever you want to call it. When you look at politics like a 2D concept, stuff is obviously going to seem conflicting because politics is three-dimensional just like people are. It's complex, it's nuanced.
Like, there's a whole element of almost near schizophrenia with politics where people jump around from policy to policy, mixing and mashing stuff as they please. Like, most of the states and governments are ran on pure anarchy, be it democratic, monarchical, authoritarian, totalitarian, whatever. It's all chaos at the end of the day.
Actually, we have, like, big tent parties, which have a whole thing of ideologies.
Well, yeah, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about how people tend to view politics is incredibly what's the word I'm looking for? Not shallow, but overly simplistic.
Yeah, the left and the right spectrum, it may have worked during the French Revolution, but it's not really good now.
Well, even then it wasn't accurate.
Yeah, it wasn't accurate, and like the entire I forget who said it. I forget whose quote it was. It's like, but I refuse to use the left-wing versus right-wing political spectrum because I refuse to use anything created by the French. I forget who said that.
That was me. The French Revolution created this whole left and right spectrum because you had conservative aristocracy on the right, and then you have
no. There was this other famous politician, or like I think he was a British dude who used that quote. I forget the dude's name though, and I'm gonna kick myself in the butt later for forgetting it, but either or. Anywho, well, I said we were gonna make this a shorter episode, and we took a lot longer than I thought we would.
Yeah. Also, are we close to closing it down, or?
Does anyone else have anything to say?
I have nothing more to add.
Also, like and subscribe to the podcast if you want to see any more podcasts. So we will be here either on Friday and Saturday at what was it? 7 o'clock?
Yeah. 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central.
Yeah. And also, if you want to contact us personally, go on X, formerly Twitter.
Or shoot us an email.
Yeah.
Anywho.
And if you want to watch the podcast live, join our Discord.
Mm-hmm.
Everything will be in the description below.
Yes, everything will be in the description below. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. Tonight's prayer will be dedicated to the people of Armenia. Would you all please bow your heads?
Alright.
In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Heavenly Father, I pray for the people of Armenia. your first state to convert to the word of your Son, Jesus Christ, officially. Your most loyal servants are under siege on both sides. I pray that you deliver them, Lord, and keep them safe from harm and allow justice to be done in their favor. And I also pray that the people of Azerbaijan and Turkey see the error of their ways and the horror of the genocides they commit against the ethnic minorities in their territory on the land that was originally theirs, and that they repent. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. God
And we
bless
will
you
see you
all.
next time, folks. God bless the United States, and God bless you.